Shalom, my friends. When I told you last week at the fellowship to stay in touch and to stay connected, I'm so happy that you took me seriously. And I encourage you to continue to do so because so many of you shared your thoughts and ideas and words of support and encouragement, and you asked so many questions. Excellent questions. Every single question was a good one. One of the many questions I received, it was almost like a theme, was about the part of the fellowship which discussed the entire idea about intentions and whether or not the intentions of Nadav and Avihu made a difference. And if they had noble intentions, then why did Hashem not let them live? Or regarding the intentions of Lot and his daughters, or Lot's daughters to perpetuate mankind. Should that have made a difference? Now, while I believe that the events in the Torah confirm my view that these intentions made all the difference in the world, whether with Nadav and Avihu, of who Hashem said, Bekrovai ekadesh, through those closest to me I will be sanctified, or through Lot's daughters, from whom King David and the Messiah we are waiting for are descended. Despite that, I want to speak deeper about these intentions, because the more I reflected on the issue, the more I realized why this week's Torah portion of Tazria Mitzorah followed last week's Torah portion about Nadav and Avihu. Now, this week's Torah portion speaks about sara'at, which is defined as leprosy. But that is not really an accurate translation, because while the leprosy of today, which is mostly gone in the world, while that is a physical disease, the sara'at of the Torah is clearly described as a direct physical consequence of a spiritual disease, the root of which is Lashon Hara, the evil tongue. Now, there are two primary categories of the evil tongue, the worst being motzi shemra, translated as inventing an evil name, otherwise known as slander, in which these lies are just made up, thereby creating an evil name and reputation for another person purely out of one's imagination. But a very close second in evil is Lashon Hara, where you speak about evil about someone, but it's gossip, and it's based on the truth. It's rooted in truth. And you're simply sharing and conveying the truth to others and spreading a bad name about them. The best example the Torah gives about pure Lashon Hara is the case of Miriam speaking about her brother Moshe to her other brother Aaron. And by the way, I have a deep appreciation that in Hashem's ultimate wisdom, he doesn't cover up or whitewash the sins of our greatest tzaddikim, our prophets, our leaders, but on the contrary, their sins and shortcomings are focused upon, amplified, and studied, not only so that we can all learn from these very human shortcomings, but so that we can remember that we too can be righteous and holy and close to God despite our own sins and shortcomings. Okay, so the incident with Miriam happened in the beginning of the 12th chapter of Numbers in Bamidbar. Vayidaber Miriam v'Aharon b'Moshe al odot ha'isha ha'kushit. And Miriam and Aaron spoke against Moses because of the Cushite woman that he had married, for he had married a Cushite woman. And they said, has the Lord indeed spoken only to Moshe? Has he not also spoken by us? And Hashem heard it. Now our sages explain that Miriam was criticizing Moshe for separating from his wife and not being intimate with her. We're taught that this is because of his unique and unparalleled level of prophecy that was incompatible at that time with intimacy with his wife. But either Miriam didn't understand that, or it wasn't a good enough reason for her. After all, she and Aaron were both great prophets, and they didn't separate from their spouses. This was the judgment, this was the thought that Miriam spoke to her brother Aaron about their brother Moshe. And Hashem heard these words, and he defended Moshe as the most humble man of all men on earth. And he struck Miriam with sara'at for speaking this Lashon Hara about Moshe. And as part of the consequence of getting sara'at, she was banished from the camp for 7 days. Now, were these words she spoke not true? They were true. But in Miriam's limited human intelligence, she didn't see the entire picture. She didn't understand the depth of the situation as only God himself could understand. So she projected her partial and limited judgment of the situation. And her guilt in this matter was confirmed by the ultimate judge, who struck her with sara'at and banished her from the camp. Now, at my Shabbat table, I was discussing this with my holy and beloved guests, and I made a suggestion. I brought a Kabbalistic source about why I felt like Lashon Hara is such a foundational and severe sin. The mystics divide the world into 4 categories. The highest level is called medaber, which means to speak. That would be mankind, the only living creation gifted with the ability to speak and articulate words. Then, to simplify the other 3, is chaya, which are creatures with the spirit of life, animals, tzomeach, which are plants that sprout and grow, and then domem, which are inanimate objects. Now, I suggested that it is our words that make us in the image of God. God created the world with words. Words have tremendous creative power. As I've shared, that's where the famous words abracadabra, where we've shared this before, that's where they come from. Avra, I will create. Kedabra, as I speak. We're able to create realities in the world through our speech. This is why I think one of the most underused and overlooked powers that mankind has is the power of blessing. We have the power to bless each other and to be conduits through which God blesses and channels and pours out his light upon each other in the world. So for me, I've been blessed to internalize this truth so much that rarely do I have an interaction with someone in which I don't bless them. It's already sort of like habit to me, whether it be the cashier at the grocery store or the plumber fixing my sink. This element, it just adds an entire level of meaning and joy to my day and can transform an otherwise normal and mundane interaction to a holy and transcendent experience. We can build people up with our words, or we can tear them down. But then one of my guests, far more learned than I, he said that the sages explain that while the highest level of life is indeed medaber, as I said, it is not referring to words or to speaking. It's referring to our thoughts. It's referring to mankind's ability to have rational intellectual capacity and determine how we see and perceive the world around us and the people around us. So at first I was a little displeased with this idea because it didn't exactly fit in with my belief at that very moment, that it isn't thoughts that make us the most godly, but it is our words themselves. But the more I thought about what my friend Akiva said, the more I realized that what he shared was an even deeper truth, because our thoughts are the root of our words. Our thoughts, our ideas, our perspectives, they give birth to the words that come from our mouths. Our words are merely a manifestation of our thoughts. The deepest fixing we are here to do is to fix the prism through which we see people and see the world. We talk about this in our fellowship a lot. I've talked about the 3 words which have been among the most powerful mantras, which I repeat throughout the day, specifically when something happens that appears to be adverse or unfortunate. As you all know, we could probably say them together. These words are Gam zu letova. This too is for the good. That while something may appear to the human eye as negative or unfortunate, everything is from God and everything is for our benefit. And then I realized that this doesn't only apply to the events of our lives, but to the people in our lives as well. But seeing all the people in our lives as good people, everyone we interact with is a good person, judging them with the benefit of the doubt, well, I can speak for myself, that can be much more difficult than judging the difficult events in our lives as good. And I think the reason is that we look at people and we say, well, they have free will. They have agency. They decided to do or say this evil thing, so they're evil. But an external event, well, that's from God. I can wrap my mind around that. Well, I remember one of my rabbis, his name is Rabbi Rav Machlis, and he is a very special brand of tzaddik. I could spend the whole fellowship just talking about him, but I want to share a story that left an imprint on my 18-year-old mind. We were walking from his house to the Western Wall for the prayers on Shabbat, and all of a sudden a whole group of cars drove by. Now keep in mind this was on Shabbat, when one is not supposed to drive, and Rav Machlis screamed out, Mazel Tov, Mazel Tov! And I turned to him and said, why are you screaming Mazel Tov at these cars that are clearly violating Shabbat? And he said, these people must be driving to the hospital on the way to give birth, so we should wish them a Mazel Tov. Because as you may know, you're not only permitted to violate the Sabbath to save a life, but you're commanded to do so. And I remember thinking to myself that he must be fooling himself. Maybe one car is on the way to the hospital, but all of them, no way, not a chance. And the more I got to know Rav Machlis, and the more I experienced humanity and the world as a whole, I realized that Rav Machlis was teaching us a way of thinking. And this has stayed with me and grown throughout the years. Rav Machlis experiences the world through a prism of I don't know, of recognizing that he doesn't see the whole picture, that we simply can't possibly know why people do what they do. But if we did know, if we truly knew the whole story, if we truly knew the pains and traumas of their journey, if we understood what they've learned and what they haven't, then we would see that they are indeed, at their very essence, they're good. But because we aren't omniscient, because we aren't God, it helps to make up an excuse for them to hold on to. And for the time being, for our purposes, this excuse will stand in place of the real reason that if we knew, we could judge them with love and compassion. The sacrifice that the Torah prescribes in this week's Parsha for Tzara'at is that when the Kohen, the priest, diagnoses the person as having Tzara'at, they're cast out of the camp for 7 days. And Rabbi Sachs points out that this is indeed a punishment which fits the crime of Lashon Hara. It's midah keneged midah, attribute for attribute, because by spreading a harsh judgment about someone, by infecting others with our negative perspectives of that person, we're dividing up the community. We are turning the camp against each other. And therefore, in turn, we ourselves must be cast out from the camp to consider and reflect on the sin of gossip or slander that we've committed. And then after 7 days, the Kohen examines the tzara'at, and if he deems that the person is healed, then, chapter 14, verses 4 through 7, chapter 14, verse 4, then shall the priest command to take for him who is to be cleansed 2 birds alive and clean, and cedar wood and scarlet and hyssop. And the priest shall command that one of the birds be killed in an earthen utensil over running water. As for the living bird, he shall take it, and the cedar wood and the scarlet and the hyssop, and shall dip them and the living bird in the blood of the bird that was killed over the running water. And he shall sprinkle upon him who is to be cleansed from the leprosy 7 times, and shall pronounce him clean, and shall let the living bird loose, free the living bird in the open field. Now here's the question. Out of all the animals to sacrifice to cleanse oneself of speaking Lashon Hara, why birds? Well, Rashi explains that Tzara'at comes from Lashon Hara, an act of chattering. Birds are needed for the purification because birds are always chattering and whistling. So they remind us, Rashi says, of our unnecessary and destructive chattering. But then Rav Yoshua of Belz asks a deeper question that he himself answers. He asks, why are 2 birds needed for this atonement? Now open your hearts, my friends. Rav Yoshua of Belz explains that just as one is punished for speaking Lashon Hara, so is one punished for the good words that came to his mind that he could have said, but he refrained. He explains that one bird atones for Lashon Hara, and the other bird atones for the kind and loving words he could have said, but that he refrained from saying. He explains that the fact that the bird that is shechted, slaughtered, and thereby silenced, it alludes to the atonement that he needs for speaking Lashon Hara. That as they say, silence can be a virtue. It's better than slander and gossip. But the other bird, the one that's dipped into the water-blood mixture and then used to sprinkle on the metzorah, well, that bird is set free to continue chirping and singing, to remind us that we should continue to speak the many kind and empowering and loving and compassionate words that we have to say about our fellow man. But in order to say good things about people, we need to think good things about people. And in order to think good things about people, we need to judge them favorably in our hearts and in our minds. Because, friends, it's easy for us here in the fellowship to love each other. For me, loving all of you requires no effort. You're all a revealed blessing in my life. But loving people who have caused us pain, seeing the good in people who have been a source of darkness in our lives, well, that is a lifetime of work. But it's worth every moment of effort that we invest in it. Because as we all know, the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed due to sinat chinam, baseless hatred. And therefore the temple will be rebuilt. And Hashem's presence will return to the world due to ahavat chinam, baseless love. Hashem, please give us the eyes to judge our fellow human being favorably, to give them the benefit of the doubt. Allow us to love them and to be charitable with our judgments of them. And therefore, Hashem, please be generous in your judgments of us, because we all know that we fall short in our deeds and we stray in our actions. Allow us to be generous and compassionate in seeing the deepest goodness in the motivation of others. And through this goodness and love, bring Mashiach and rebuild the temple so your goodness, the ultimate goodness, and your love, the ultimate love, will fill the earth, flood throughout the entire world. And may this love bring all of mankind to know you and to love you, and therefore to love each other and cherish each other, so that we will finally beat our swords into plowshares and never learn war again. Amen. May Hashem bless you all, my friends, and protect you. Stay in touch. Stay connected. I love hearing from you. Back to you, Jeremy. This highlight was taken from the Land of Israel Fellowship. Every week, hundreds of families from literally around the world come together on our live Zoom sessions to strengthen each other, to inspire each other, and to learn Torah from the Land of Israel, in which we connect the dots between the Bible, the Hebrew language, and the confusing events of our times. Go to www.thelandofisrael.com/fellowship or click on the link below to join. Thank you.